Good day, everyone. We are Group 3 and we are here to discuss the genetically modified organisms, the plants, animals, and medicines. So, to give us a background knowledge about GMO, here is Miss Ascendido.
What is GMO? So para sa GMO, ito ay isang inhenyeriyang genetiko o genetic engineering at mas tinatawag ring genetic modification. So ito yung direktang manipulasyon ng genome ng isang organismo. Gamit ang bioteknolohiya, ito rin ay hindi direktang nagbabago ng gene sa pamamagitan lamang ng isang artificial na seleksyon. Kaya naman ang bagong papasok dito ay ang DNA na talagang mas kilala natin at pamilyar sa atin sa mga pagsasali ng mga traits at sa pamamagitan na din ng pagsisynthesize.
For our next reporter, here is Miss Esoy and Miss Victoria to discuss the production of GMO.
Production of genetically modification organisms. Genetics modification involves the insertion or deletion of genes. Genetic modification is a technology that involves inserting DNA into the genome of an organism to produce a genetic modification plant. New DNA is transferred into plant cells. Usually, the cells are then grown in tissue culture where they develop into plants. The seeds produced by these plants will inherit the new DNA. Genetic modification of plants involves adding a specific stretch of DNA into the plant's genome, giving it new or different characteristics. This could include changing the way the plant grows or making it resistant to a particular disease. The new DNA becomes part of the GM plant's or genetic modification plant's genome, which the seeds produced by these plants will contain. Why are GMOs produced? Most of the genetically modification organisms crops grown today were developed to help farmers prevent crop and food loss and control weeds. The three most common traits found in genetically modification organism crops are resistance to certain damaging insects, tolerance of certain herbicides used to control weeds.
Good day everyone, I'm Joy Victoria and I will discuss the production of GMO. GMOs are generally made for medical, environmental, or commercial reasons. Example, a GM bacteria have been developed that have had a gene for insulin added to their genome. These bacteria produce large quantities of insulin as they grow, which is then extracted and used by people with diabetes to control their blood sugar levels. Take a look at the picture. It is a photo comparing a normal mouse with a mouse with the ACER1 gene mutated. The modified mouse has less hair than the normal mouse, and that is one of the example of production of GMO.
Good day, everyone. I am Mariel Hobilia, and I am here to discuss the one of the various species that are genetically modified, and one of it is the genetically modified plants. So, biofortification is the umbrella term for the process by which the nutritional quality of food crops is enhanced. The traditional agricultural breeding approaches for biofortification are time consuming, but it can also enhance the nutritional value of some foods. However, advances in molecular biology are rapidly being exploited to biofortify various crops. So, when did the GMO technology occurred? Here we have Dennis Gonsalves of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, who adopted a GMO strategy that had previously been used to produce potatoes that are resistant to several viruses and made papayas resistant to BRSV. So, the GMO technology occurred after the introduction of papaya ring spot virus or PRSV to Hawaii. PRSV devastated papaya production to the point where growers couldn't produce crops, and the attempt to use plant breeding to produce a virus resistant plant were unsuccessful. So, no sexually compatible plant with resistance to PRSV could be located. So, no amount of traditional plant breeding by crossing would produce resistance. But the PRSV only stopped when Dennis uses the GMO strategy. So when we say GMO strategy, it is the adding a copy of the viral coat protein gene into the plant's chromosomes. The coat protein protects the virus as it is transmitted from plant to plant, and it is essential for replication. The viral gene is engineered to be in the opposite orientation from its orientation in the virus. This opposite orientation of the viral gene, now acting as spot gene, effectively shuts down viral replication before it can cause disease and making the plant resistant. And to introduce the engineered viral gene into the plant's chromosome without crossing, horticulturist John Sanford invented a means of introducing genes into plant cells by literally shooting the gene into the nucleus of a cell. This process of introducing a transgene into a plant is called transformation. The plant cell or the whole plant carrying the engineered gene is said to be transformed or transgenic. It is synonyms for GMO. There is also a bacteria plant pathogen that produces crown gall disease, and this is the Agrobacterium tumefaciens. This bacterium transfers a small amount of its DNA to the plant as part of its pathogen attack. So those biologists studying Agrobacterium's life cycle realized they could use the natural DNA transfer process to introduce genes into plants by piggybacking a gene of interest from any organism onto the Agrobacterium's transfer process. This has been very successful and is the most used method of gene introduction into many crops. Although the genes to produce a GMO virus resistant papaya were introduced with a gene gun, most of those in GMO crops were introduced using Agrobacterium. Humans have been altering the genetics of plants for thousands of years through the slow process of crossbreeding between crops. And today, scientists can take a shortcut to modify plants by editing their DNA in a lab setting. And the art of GMO technology is discovering how non-plant organisms such as virus, bacteria, fungi, insects, and so on might contribute a gene to improve a plant, be it through weed control, increased nutrition in foods, or resistance to pests or viruses. In modifying plants, there is a pros and cons. Our first pros will be the fewer pesticides. It is because many GMO crops have been altered to be less vulnerable to insects and other pests. This is because their genes produce a protein that kills many pests and insects, helping them to protect from damage. So instead of having to be sprayed with a complex pesticide, these crops come with an innate pesticide. This means that farmers don't need to use as much pesticide on crops. Our second pros is that genetically modified plants often cost less. It is because the GMO crops are bred to grow efficiently. This means that farmers can produce the same amount of food using less land, less water, and fewer pesticides than conventional crops. Because they can save on resources, food producers can also charge lower prices for GMO foods. In some cases, the cost of foods like corn, beets, and soybeans may be cut by 15% to 30%. So our third pros is that GMOs may have more nutrients. Why? Because certain GMO crops are designed to provide more nutrients like vitamins or minerals. For example, researchers have been able to create a modified form of African corn that contains 2 times as much folate when compared to traditional crops, 6 times as much vitamin C when compared to traditional crops, and 169 times more beta carotene than traditional crops. GMO crops can offer many advantages in cost and nutrition, but some experts worry that they carry health risks as well. So here's our cons about GMOs. GMOs may cause allergic reactions. Because GMO foods contain DNA from other organisms, so it is possible that the new DNA can trigger allergies in people who wouldn't normally be allergic to the food. So our next reporter is Miss Basbas.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Venus Basbas, and I will be reporting the genetically modified animals. Genetically modified animals are produced by inserting the gene of interest into the target organisms. Pigs, chickens, cows, fish, and mosquitoes are some of the genetically modified animals produced by the scientists. In these animals, the embryo is genetically altered by the gene of interest, and the resulting animals produces more milk and meat, prevents diseases, and etc. Conclusion: genetically modified organisms offer many potential benefits for the environment. It helps reducing ecological damage. For instances, certain genetically engineered bacteria can produce biodegradable plastics. A bacterium called Ralstonia utopia converts glucose and some other acids into a flexible polymer. This polymer is used for making plastics. For the pros and cons of genetically modified animals shows that this developed science has positives and negatives that must be carefully balanced. Even outside of the ethical considerations, the alteration of a natural evolutionary cycle of animal could have consequences we've not even considered. That's why this subject should be approached very carefully. The pros of genetically modified animals. First, it offers potential solutions for public health issues. What if animals could be bred to carry natural antibodies against common deadly diseases that humans face every day? These natural resistances would be another step toward existing natural human lifespan. Second, more food product could be created. To some extent, genetic modification has happened throughout history. Animals that created more meat are bred with others to change the evolutionary track of the animal. At the end, result is more food that can feed a hungry population. The third one is it may improve the quality of life for animals that are created. Animals can also be genetically modified to have an improved life. This may include longer lifespan, better adaptability to changing environments, and other features that can make animals and more competitive in its natural habitat. For the cons of genetically modified animals, first, there are always seem to be unforeseen change when genetics are modified. When one benefit is finally achieved, there tends to be equal and opposite reactions somewhere else. Despite all the efforts of genetically modify an animal, a random mutation can ruin all of the science. Second, it may harm the animals at the expenses of humanity. How we treat others helps to define who we are as a people. We are willing to treat animals fairly for our benefit. What becomes the next in the process? Sacrificing humans that don't contribute the expectations as well? The third one is it could create allergies. Genetically modified animals may provide more food and better nutrition, but the changes could also develop an allergic resistance for the food source. Over time, it may mean fewer people get fed because of the scientific alteration that have occurred. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So for our next reporter, it will be Mrs. Lacaba.
My name is Mary Rose F. Lucava and I'm going to discuss the pros and cons of GMO and medicines. But before I proceed to the pros and cons of GMO and medicine, let us discuss first how are GMOs used in medicine and what are the benefits. The benefits of GMOs in medicine is widespread and extremely important, especially as the demand for new treatments and vaccines increases globally. Currently, most pharmaceutical medications are manufactured using non-synthetic ingredients. GMOs assist in this process of genetic engineering or GE. Organisms with therapeutic potential used in the genetic engineering process include bacteria, which are the easiest to grow at a large scale production. Yeast and mammalian cells are also used to produce certain GMO medicines. Medicines and drugs currently produced using GMOs. Insulin is one of the most widely used medications and an essential lifeline for diabetics. It was the first ever GE drugs approved for use. Since its release, GE drugs have continued to be researched, developed, and released, improving symptoms and quality of life for countless people worldwide. The medical benefits of GMOs are almost endless, and there are many more pharmaceutical products with GMOs either already on pharmacy shelves or in development. The pros of GMO in medicine is GMO medicines are more consistent and don't carry the same contamination risk. Plants aren't the only type of GMO that we are using. GMOs are also used to produce many medicines and vaccines that help treat or prevent diseases. Before GMOs, many common medicines had to be extracted from blood donors, animal parts, or even cadavers. These medicines had a number of problems, including the risk of transmission of diseases, inconsistent and unreliable supply, but GMO medicines are more consistent and don't carry the same contamination risk. Next pros is fewer pesticides often cost less. It is good to have a fewer pesticides because it can contaminate soil, water, turf, and other vegetation. In addition, in addition to killing insects or weeds, pesticides can be toxic to a host of other organisms including birds, fish, beneficial insects, and non-target plants. And fewer pesticides may have more nutrients. Cons of GMO in medicine. GMOs may increase antibiotic resistance. Antibiotic resistance is one of the biggest threats to global health, food security, and development today. It can affect anyone. It is occurs naturally, but misuse of these in humans and animals is accelerating the process. It will also cause allergic reactions. Since genetic engineering transfer genes, the DNA recipes for proteins, from one organism to others, a genetically engineered plant can trigger an allergic response if a host plant protein is allergenic anyhow, or if the new transgenic protein is allergenic.
So next will be Miss Patane.
Role of GMOs in environmental management. Another application of GMOs is in the management of environmental issues. For example, some bacteria can produce biodegradable plastic, and the transfer of the ability of microbes that can be easily grown in the laboratory may enable the wide-scale greening of the plastic industry. In early 1990s, Zeneca, a British company, developed a microbially produced biodegradable plastic called biopol or polyhydroxyl canoate or PHS. The plastic was made with the use of a GM bacterium, Ralstonia eutropa, to convert glucose and a variety of organic acid into a flexible polymer. In GMOs and endowed with a bacterial encoded ability to metabolize oil and heavy metals. It may provide efficient bioremediation strategy.
So for our last reporter, here is Miss Calaminos.
Good day, everyone. I'm Kiana Calaminos, and to summarize our report, genetically modified organisms are living organisms whose genetic material has been artificially manipulated in a laboratory through genetic engineering. It helps in reducing ecological damage, and it offers many potential benefits to the environment. Pero syempre, meron pa rin pong cons or disadvantages ang mga ito. Halimbawa na lang po sa human life, maaari po itong maging harmful sa ibang tao, lalo na po yung mga genetically modified foods. Maging sa plants, animals, and medicines ay marami siyang benefits, and at the same time, meron din po itong mga disadvantages.
So that's all for our report about genetically modified organisms, about plants, animals, and medicines. We all hope that you understand our report. And if you have any questions, you can ask us through PMs or DMs. Thank you.